Hello and welcome to another episode of Baughcuts. Today's episode is focusing on William Blake's poem London, and the structure of these episodes is always the same, and it, in effect, reflects the approach we need in the exam itself. So I'm going to start with the poem's title, and then we're really going to walk you through three key quotations with analysis, with word level analysis that we can use in our exam. So, starting with the title, the poem London. It's deceptively simple, and yet the title of London is profoundly significant. By naming the poem after the city, Blake immediately grounds this poem in a specific real world setting, and that actually distinguishes the poem London from Blake's more symbolic or countryside locations that are often found in his other poems. It's a choice by William Blake that signals a direct engagement with the tangible social and political realities of 18th century London. But it's also worth remembering that London's not just a backdrop, but it's a character in the poem in its own right. London in the poem is a representation of the oppressive structures and systemic suffering that was prevalent during Blake's lifetime and during the 18th century. The poem delves into themes of poverty, institutional corruption, and the psychological constraints imposed by society. These elements of the poem underscore the pervasive control and commodification within the City of London, reflecting Blake's critique of the loss of individual freedom and also the moral decay that he perceived in urban life. So, by titling the poem London, Blake emphasizes the city as a microcosm of broader societal issues, inviting us as readers to reflect on the human cost of industrialization and that erosion of innocence. The title sets the stage for an exploration of urban, very specifically urban despair, making the poem a powerful social commentary and critique on the conditions of Blake's contemporary society. Turning now to our three quotations, and we're going to begin with the opening line of the poem, the famous opening line, which is, quote, "I wander through each chartered street near where the chartered Thames does flow." Now, in these opening lines, Blake's speaker, possibly Blake himself, describes walking through London and immediately comments on the pervasive control and ownership in the city. The repetition of chartered, a word that means mapped, legally defined, or owned under charter, is highly significant. By saying each chartered street and even the chartered Thames, Blake is criticizing how everything in the city, even a natural river, is claimed, controlled by commerce and authority. The Thames, that symbol of natural life flowing through London, is described as constrained by charters, implying that human laws and indeed corruption have unnaturally restricted nature and therefore, by extension, freedom itself. The verb wander conveys the speaker's aimlessness or perhaps his observational stance, moving without a set purpose except to witness and observe. This casual movement contrasts with the oppressive atmosphere implied by that word chartered, highlighting the individual's relative powerlessness in the face of systemic control. Alternatively, we can read that wandering, that kind of aimlessness, as a rejection of the very purposeful kind of commercial movement of the city or through the city that many Londoners themselves would be forced to engage in. Thematically, this opening quote introduces oppression and authority. It sets a scene where every inch of the city seems to be under some form of control or has a price. It reflects the power of institutions, government, monarchy, business, and commerce that have parceled out the city for profit, leaving no space untouched. This directly ties into the theme of power and the abuses of power, as well as the conflict between freedom and control. Blake suggests that London's citizens are confined not just by physical walls, but by economic and social structures, the mind-forged manacles we'll come to later on in the poem. So that use of the word chartered twice creates a tone maybe of scorn or weariness. You can imagine it being almost spit out in disgust. By coupling it with the majestic Thames, Blake heightens that sense of irony and moral outrage. In short, this opening quotation paints London as a place where natural and human life is subjugated by material authority, setting up the poem's broader critique of urban society's lack of liberty and pervasive sense of woe. Right, quotation 2, one of the greatest lines in all of literature. The mind-forged manacles I hear. This powerful metaphor is the climax of the speaker's observations in the second stanza. Having described the cries of London's people in every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, Blake's speaker notes that he hears mind-forged manacles clinking away in those cries. Now, manacles are chains or handcuffs, and they are clearly symbols of oppression and enslavement. Mind-forged, though, means that these shackles are made by the mind. They could be the result of imposed ideology, internalized oppression, or indeed despair. This phrase suggests that the people of London are imprisoned by thoughts and beliefs drummed into them by society. They might be chained, in a sense, by their acceptance of misery, by their loss of hope, or by the psychological impact of the institutions that charter their lives. It's a critique of how authority and societal structures, like government, church, and monarchy, have not just physically restricted people through poverty, child labour, etc., but also mentally, psychologically. People believe themselves to be unfree. They accept psychologically that they are unfree, and thus they are unfree. They make it true by thinking it. The fact that the speaker can hear these manacles in the cries and voices around him implies that every sigh or cry carries the sound of that psychological bondage. The alliteration of the M sound in mind-forged manacles gives the phrase a heavy, almost kind of muffled sound, maybe echoing that clinking or the drone of indoctrination. Thematically, it's a quote that goes to the heart of internal and external conflict. The external oppression has become internalized within people's minds, the minds that are manacled or chained. It underscores Blake's emphasis on freedom, or indeed the lack of it. True freedom is impossible in London because even the imagination is shackled by the conditions of life. The power here is wielded subtly by those in charge. They don't even need literal chains when people's own thoughts keep them in line. This line, then, is a piece of scathing social commentary, aligning with the poem's themes of oppression, despair, and the corruption of innocence. Even infants, of course, are going to grow into these mental chains. It highlights the tragedy that not only are bodies restricted through class and through material circumstance, but their spirit, their mind, their imagination is too, which is in some senses a far more insidious form of conflict. And then we've got the final line of the poem, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. In the final stanza, Blake culminates his grim tour through the midnight streets of London with a haunting oxymoron, marriage hearse. The full context is the line, and blights with plagues the marriage hearse, referring back to the youthful harlot's curse. Essentially, Blake is describing how the curse or disease spread by a young prostitute blights or corrupts, withers away the sanctity of marriage, turning a wedding coach into a funeral carriage, the hearse. That phrase, marriage hearse, joins together, yokes together the ideas of joyful union with death, implying that even love and life events are infected by the filth and disease, both literal and moral, of the city. That word plagues evokes sexually transmitted diseases like syphilis, which were rampant in Blake's time and could be passed from prostitutes or sex workers to husbands and then to wives, resulting in miscarriages, death, and so on. Symbolically, it suggests that the institutions that should bring happiness, marriage and family, are doomed in this version of London. The city's moral and physical decay poisons all that is good. It's a final image that encapsulates a key theme: moral corruption and the human cost of oppressive power structures. The fact that a harlot's curse, a direct result of poverty and exploitation, comes back to blight the highest levels of society, marriage being also a religious and social institution, implies a cycle of suffering engendered by those in power. The oxymoron itself, marriage, hearse, leaves a striking final impression. Life and death intertwined, love turning to death. It underscores the conflict between innocence and corruption. Even the innocent, beautiful institution of marriage is not spared. In summary, this quotation concludes the poem's relentless depiction of suffering and decay by showing that the corruption is total. It attacks body, mind, and the institutions of love and family. It's a dark condemnation of London's society, conveying Blake's central message. Power, wielded by church, crown, and commerce, has created a diseased city where joy and life are stifled by death and despair.